Hey guys, Sean Obrien here. Just wanted to take a moment and talk to you guys about binding stance. It's really important to try to figure out a really good, comfortable position for your bindings. You want to kind of minimize the strain on your knees. Wakeboarding is kind of an impact sport, so try to preserve those as much as possible. So for some people, if your stance is a little too wide, it might add a little too much strain on your knees. A little too narrow, you might feel a little unstable. So it's really important to find that perfect balancing point. For me, I personally ride one in. It works really well for my body type. I don't feel like it's too much strain. There's a really good way to kind of get a ballpoint figure of where your stance needs to be, and that's to actually stand up, kind of jump, and see where your feet land. You should be about shoulder width apart. You might be a little bit wider, you might be a little bit narrower, but use that as kind of a general guideline. And from there, you'll also see kind of how your feet are angled out, and that will kind of correlate with the angles for the binding stance. So if you look at the plate, you'll see all the teeth, and that's how you're going to lock the binding onto the board. But on the outside of that, you'll see the stance angles. And really want to make sure you remember those angles, just because it's going to make it a lot easier for you to set up your stance consistently if you ever take your bindings off or if you share your bindings with somebody else. So let's go ahead and get this binding back on the board. If you look down through the track, you can kind of see where the insert is. You can move the binding forward and back, and that really changes the positioning of how your stance is on the board. You really want to make sure this is centered. If you're off to one side or another, it's going to adjust your edging improperly. So you really want to be centered on the board. And for me, I personally like to have a 15-degree stance on the outside and 12.5 on the inside. So we're going to line that up. We'll drop this guy in and start getting it on the board. And then we'll do it to the other side. 12.5. And you don't want to crank it down too tight because you might have to make some small adjustments. But once you get it in, make sure you're pretty equidistant and go ahead and tighten them down. Traditionally, most riders use a stance that's slightly angled out. It's considered a duck stance. So go ahead and set your bindings up that way. That way you can ride regular and switch, and it'll be the same angle. And then if you're just getting into the sport, don't be afraid to tweak your binding setup. Go ahead and adjust your angles, kind of adjust them forward and back to see what fits you the best way.
Sweet.